there. Thank you for hanging in here today to the end. I hope that you're getting inspired. I know I am. I'm a filmmaker, and some people might say that I'm a risk taker. But I like to think of my journey more along the lines of what Joseph Campbell calls following your bliss. And I've been very blessed to have the opportunity to do that over and over again. So what I'd like to talk to you about today is my journey to Bhutan and how Bhutan changed the way that I think about the world as well as the way that I choose to be in the world. So my journey started in 1997 when National Geographic sent me to Nepal to start to develop a story about the Sherpas who had climbed Mount Everest during what became the fatal climb that was chronicled by John Krakauer into thin air. I don't know if you remember that climb and John's riveting account, but I was to develop a story about their perspective on what happened on Mount Everest. And tragically, while I was preparing this presentation, even more Sherpas died in an avalanche on Everest. So I lived with a Sherpa family in Nepal for 2.5 weeks in their very modest mountain home. And it was very much a life-changing experience for me. First of all, what I witnessed was a connection to the family and traditions and spirituality like I had never seen before. I had never experienced anything like that. I also witnessed a broader cultural connection to the group, to the community, that was very different than what I had ever seen before and very different from our Western focus of focusing on the individual. The other thing was I was exposed to this idea of non-attachment. And I was so moved by non-attachment that I actually left my suitcase and all of my stuff in Nepal, because I just felt like, oh my God, I have too much. I don't need all this stuff. They need it. So I left everything there. And I came home and I thought about what is Buddhism? What is non-attachment? What is it about this culture that's so intriguing to me? And I kind of left it alone. 3 years later, through some chance meetings with friends, I was introduced to the country of Bhutan. And Bhutan is actually the last Buddhist nation on the planet. And I was very intrigued by Bhutan because here's kind of this country that just is focused on Buddhism, while Nepal actually has many different religions and different faiths. So I tried to make a film about Bhutan over and over again. I was at Discovery Channel, and I tried to make it there. I tried to make it at National Geographic. Nothing worked. And then unexpectedly, in 2008, a friend from Bhutan called and said, you have to come now. You have to document the coronation of the world's youngest king, Bhutan's 5th king. So I said, okay, I'll just go raise $100,000 and I'll come right now. And I did. And I thought it was going to be a documentary that was akin to the royals. But that's not what it was. So I got there and I filmed the coronation. But when I was there, I sensed something very deep that was in the fabric of the country. And it definitely stemmed from their Buddhism, but it was in every part of the culture. And it was even in the coronation itself. It was in every aspect of the coronation itself. And when I got home, I did have a partnership with National Geographic International, and it fell through. And it left me with 300 hours of high-definition footage. And I said, what am I going to do with this footage? And I sat, and I thought about it. And I said, okay, so I'm not going to tell a story about a coronation of a king, but I can tell a story about a country's shift to democracy. And I can tell a story about G&H. And G&H is actually an invention from Bhutan's monarchs. The kings invented gross national happiness. And what it tells us is that we can measure our success and our well-being by using a variety of dimensions, not just one, which is GDP in our society. So I formed an alliance with the Bhutan Foundation in Washington, D.C., and Bhutan, A Kingdom of Happiness was born. A half-hour film emerged and was shown to a packed house in Washington, D.C. at the D.C. Environmental Film Festival. And I'd like to show you the trailer for that film right now. So I have to tell you, first of all, it's beautiful. The colors are amazing, aren't they? Just absolutely incredible colors. The people are amazing. You have to have at least 4 or 5 cups of tea before you can talk to anyone about anything. So when I interviewed the Prime Minister, actually I was very fortunate because the country was just crowded with all sorts of press from all over the world. But he spent over an hour and a half with me and had 4 cups of tea. And then we talked. At the end of our dialogue, we were both in tears. That's how genuine he is. So he's actually the former PM now. So G&H gives us an opportunity to look at our lives a little bit differently. And in Bhutan, G&H, Gross National Happiness, is economic policy. As a matter of fact, the Center for Bhutan Studies and the Gross National Happiness Commission measure 9 dimensions, and they actively measure them like they do the census. So the dimensions are community vitality, preservation of culture, education, conservation of the environment, good governance, health, psychological well-being, standard of living, and use of time. Now, I realize that in the United States, this is not necessarily a practical measurement, and most of the economists agree it's not. But it does give us a different way of looking at our lives. What's important to us? Where should we put our energies and our priorities? And also, what I saw in Bhutan was, again, this connection to a whole. And it's not that the individual is not important. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the individual does better when the group does better as a whole. Okay, so if you think about the way that you might apply this to your own lives, let's look at the different dimensions and what they really mean. So community vitality. Okay, it has to do with your relationships with others and your interactions, your sense of belonging. Preservation of culture, your traditions, your spiritual beliefs. It even has to do with the way that art impacts you on a daily basis in your life. Education is more than just K through 12 or university, but how do you enrich your mind every day, all the time? Preservation of the environment is not just environmental protection, but it's actually empowering citizens to become stewards of the environment themselves. So how do you take care of the environment? Good governance. Well, they're really working hard on that one. That one has to do with being truthful, being transparent. How does everyone in society view the government? Okay, they're not there yet on that one at all. Health is more than just socialized medicine. It has to do with how do you take care of yourself as a whole person. Are you getting enough sleep? Are you getting well fed? Are you getting enough exercise? Psychological well-being has to do with your sense of purpose and how you connect to other people. It's actually very tied to the first one. And standard of living is their GDP, except that it's not just how much do you earn, but it has to do with long-term security. And it also has to do with things like even are you in a good housing environment? That's standard of living. And then use of time. And I know we all think about this all the time, but what's the balance of time in our lives? Are we spending enough time doing what we love and care about and not just working all the time? So G&H got me thinking about my own life and my own family and my own community. And it also got me thinking about what success means and not what just society tells me success means. And as a filmmaker, it got me thinking about the kinds of stories that I tell and that I want to tell. And as a matter of fact, I just finished 2 years on a wonderful project for Life Reimagined about people over the age of 40 who are reinventing their lives. And that had a lot of meaning for me, that project. And G&H got me sitting here today in front of you. Now, all of this is to say that G&H is an idea. It's a philosophy. I'm not trying to imply that G&H means that you're going to be happy. And as a matter of fact, in Bhutan, it doesn't mean that they're happy. And then you can see from the trailer that there are lots of problems in Bhutan. But what I like about the concept is that it puts out another kind of point of view. Let's look at our lives and let's say, what does it really mean to be successful? What does it mean to have well-being? And so the next thing that happened to me on my unforeseen journey is I was invited in 2012 to the United Nations. And I interviewed heads of state about the concept of a new economic paradigm. And I was kind of blown away because Costa Rica and Brazil and France are even talking about how do they take G&H dimensions and write them into their constitution and change the way that they measure success in their own countries. And then what happened after that is I formed a foundation with my son. I have an older son who's 30 years old. And it's called the Foundation for Global Inspiration. And what we would like to do with that is to empower youth, especially in the United States, to exchange ideas and to think about, well, what kinds of projects can they do around the G&H dimensions in their own communities? So we'd like to use media and feature projects like Flavio's project and say, hey, look, this is what's going on in Brazil. What can you do in your neighborhood? So G&H gets you really thinking about your life in a lot of ways. I know that it did for me. The next thing that happened, again, completely unseen, this just happened to me. I was invited to Denmark to attend a Bhutanese-Danish film festival. I was the only American, by the way. And I spoke on a panel about G&H as the only American. And I got to listen to young Bhutanese filmmakers. They were 20 years old. And they were expressing some of the issues that I mentioned in the trailer in the narrative form of film. They were very brave to do this. But what I also saw in Denmark, which, by the way, is one of the happiest countries in the world, it's rated one of the happiest countries, is that same culture of sharing and community. It's all about sharing. I'm going to give you an example. So I was there in February. It was freezing, and I never saw any sun. It was very grim. But my Danish host, who lived in a village outside of Copenhagen, took me to a co-op one night for dinner. And for $8, we socialized with about 50 people who we'd never met and had wonderful conversations. We had a scrumptious meal that was cooked all by the volunteers of the co-op. And then at the end of our meal, we cleaned our own dishes, which was so cool. And I left Denmark feeling just a greater sense of connection to humanity and that broader cultural connection that I'm talking about. And that has now led me to a new unseen journey, which is a collaboration with the Danish filmmaker who brought me to Denmark. Hans Vessing has been making films about Bhutan since the country opened up in the 1960s. And so he and I are now exploring what G&H means in more of a global perspective, and that's a very exciting opportunity for me. So I'm looking forward to doing that. So if you think about it, industrialization occurred in our country, and it kind of got us away from small communities and extended families. And I think that social media is trying to reconnect us, right? But what really is well-being? What really is happiness? And is GDP a sustainable measurement for the future and for future generations and even for our planet? So I'd like to leave you with this thought. I think that G&H is a philosophical measurement for all of us. And our founding fathers even said we have the right to pursue happiness. Although I'm going to say that was for the rich white male landowners of the time. But they were onto something, right? They were onto an idea that I think has really escaped our very fast-paced, productive, highly efficient society. So G&H offers us a new way of looking at ourselves. And so again, I think G&H is what I would call the pursuit of the 10th dimension. I'm making this up. And that is the preservation of all living beings and the earth on which we live. Thank you.